envoyé le truc. Okay, good morning, everyone. Feel free to have a seat. You know the room is not yet full, so you are more than welcome. My name is Kosivia Desu. I'm working for the Global Network for Disaster Reduction. The last report of the IPCC is apocalyptic. The report clearly states that the planet is going in the wrong direction. Climate change has significantly affected several sectors of resilience, including agriculture, access to water, food security, etc. The session of today is organized by the Global Network for Disaster Reduction and Jeunes Volontaires pour l'Environnement with the institutional support of the government of Niger. It's intended to highlight the impact some communities of the planet are experiencing, the impact from the climate change. The session itself is divided in 3 parts and will be moderated by different people. For the opening ceremony, let me call it that way, we have Ms. Issa, who is a gender focal point in Niger. We have also Dr. Kamayé Maazou, who is the Executive Secretary of the CNEDD Niger. And the last intervenant for this session is Mr. Issa Garba, who is the National Coordinator of a network called Climate Change Youth Network on climate change in Niger. He will probably detail more what this network is doing. But I want to inform you that the 3 intervenants will speak in French. I will try to summarize what they say because unfortunately we don't have the interpretation service today. So without any transition, let me invite Ms. Issa from Niger for her opening remark. On peut changer. In the protocol, it seems Dr. Kamayé Maazou will be the first to make his speech. Mr. Kamayé will share the lesson learned and some recommendations related to the vulnerability and resilience building effort in the whole in a whole of society approach. Alors, Monsieur Kamayé, vous allez donc rapidement présenter les efforts fournis en termes de vulnérabilité et de l'établissement de la résilience en matière de risques et catastrophes chez vous, au Niger. Vous allez partager essentiellement les leçons apprises, mais également quelques recommandations qui viennent donc de ce processus qui certainement est pris en charge par le CNEDD. À vous.
Merci, monsieur le modérateur. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Je pense que ce qu'on m'a posé comme question, je vais le prendre de manière plus générale. Je vais d'abord parler du cadre institutionnel mis en place au Niger pour regarder ces questions de vulnérabilité. Et maintenant, après, les quelques programmes, projets, politiques, stratégies, plans qui ont été mis en œuvre dans le cadre de la gestion des risques de catastrophes ou bien même du changement climatique des risques climatiques de manière globale. Au Niger, après la conférence de Rio en 1992, la conférence de Rio en fait, avait recommandé à ce que les pays, enfin, elle a adopté l'agenda 21 international, c'est-à-dire que le cadre mondial pour gérer l'environnement tout le long du XXIe siècle, ce qu'on appelle agenda 21. Et il a été recommandé aux pays de traduire, d'élaborer eux aussi leur agenda 21 national et de mettre un organe qui va coordonner la mise en œuvre de cet agenda 21. C'est dans ce cadre-là que le Niger, il a été créé le Conseil national de l'environnement pour un développement durable, qui est une structure composée de plusieurs ministères sectoriels, de la société civile, des associations de formation et de recherche, du secteur privé et des partenaires techniques et financiers. Et moi, je suis actuellement le secrétaire exécutif de ce conseil. Donc ce conseil, il a élaboré l'agenda 21 national du Niger qu'on appelle le PNEDD, Plan national de l'environnement pour un développement durable. Et donc dans ce plan, il est composé de 6 programmes prioritaires, dont un programme sur les changements et variabilités climatiques, il y a un programme sur la lutte contre la désertification, il y a un programme sur la gestion de la biodiversité. Donc c'est dans le cadre du programme changement et variabilité climatique que le Niger en fait élabore régulièrement ce qu'on appelle les communications nationales. Les communications nationales, ce sont des outils, donc des activités qui permettent à un pays d'élaborer son inventaire national des gaz à effet de serre et de le préparer et de le présenter au niveau du secrétariat de la Convention. La deuxième grosse partie de la communication nationale, nous sommes à la 4e, le Niger à la 4e communication nationale, c'est ce qu'on appelle les études de vulnérabilité et de l'adaptation. Donc on regarde les secteurs socio-économiques, les communautés, les zones les plus vulnérables au changement climatique. Au Niger, c'est le secteur de l'agriculture, c'est le secteur de l'eau, c'est le secteur de la foresterie, c'est le secteur de la santé, c'est le secteur du transport. Donc ce sont des secteurs dans lesquels les risques climatiques sont très importants. Donc une fois qu'on a regardé ces secteurs, on les a identifiés comme secteurs prioritaires, secteurs vulnérables au changement climatique, on essaie de faire la programmation des mesures d'adaptation. Donc dans ce cadre-là, le premier truc qu'on a eu à faire au Niger, c'est ce qu'on appelle le PANA. Le PANA, c'est le plan d'action national pour l'adaptation au changement climatique qui regarde comment faire face aux besoins immédiats et urgents liés aux effets du changement climatique. Donc ça, on l'a mis en œuvre depuis 2006. Et on a aussi une stratégie nationale sur le changement et variabilité climatique. Au-delà de ça, au Niger, on a un dispositif national de prévention et de gestion des crises et catastrophes. Donc tout ça, c'est des outils à travers lesquels nous avons mis en œuvre beaucoup de projets à l'endroit des communautés vulnérables, telles que les agriculteurs, tels que les éleveurs, tels que les femmes, tels que les jeunes. Et donc, une fois qu'un risque climatique survient, à travers ces projets, il y a des mesures d'adaptation qui ont été élaborées et qui permettent vite en fait, de faire face à leurs besoins. Le dernier élément que je veux dire, c'est que nous sommes... donc, le PANA, j'avais dit, on avait un PANA depuis 2006. Et ce PANA, c'est pour faire face aux besoins immédiats et urgents du changement climatique. Mais en fait, on a vu que ça, c'est l'adaptation par rapport au changement vécu. Mais on sait que, comme l'a dit le GIEC lui-même, il a dit, c'est que prochainement, on va subir les changements climatiques. Il y a des projections qui montrent les changements climatiques à subir dans les différents secteurs. Et donc, le Niger l'a fait dans le cadre de ses communications nationales, dans le cadre de ses activités régulières. On a fait des projections au niveau national. Et donc, à partir de ces projections, on met en place, ou on a élaboré ce qu'on appelle le PNA, le Plan national d'adaptation, le NAP, pour regarder les changements climatiques à moyen et long terme. Donc là, le PNA du Niger a été comment dirais-je, adopté et il a regardé tous ces secteurs dont j'avais parlé, les femmes, les jeunes, les secteurs privés, l'agriculture, l'élevage, la santé, et donc quelles sont les conséquences futures des changements climatiques sur sur ces différents secteurs, ces communautés, ces régions, et on a fait des propositions de mesures d'adaptation. Donc, pour dire que, en tout cas, le Niger s'est doté de beaucoup de mécanismes donc, institutionnels et de mécanismes stratégiques pour faire face à la gestion des risques. Et l'intérêt du Niger, c'est que le CNEDD qui a été créé, en fait, il avait pour mission, c'est-à-dire que de suivre la mise en œuvre des 3 conventions de Rio. Parce qu'à Rio, il y a eu 3 conventions qui étaient nées. C'est la convention sur le climat, la convention sur la désertification et la convention sur la biodiversité. Donc, en les amenant ensemble dans une même structure, en fait, on crée une synergie par rapport au financement des activités liées au risque climatique. Par exemple, si on regarde les risques climatiques de manière globale, c'est qu'ils sont gérés par le cadre de Sendai. Mais qu'on arrive à faire une synergie entre ces 3 conventions et ce cadre-là, parce que les 3 conventions sont liées dans une institution qui est le Conseil national de l'environnement pour le développement durable. Et donc, on est le pont focal de ces 3 conventions, ce qui fait que par rapport à, comment dirais-je, à la mobilisation des financements pour faire face aux risques climatiques, chez nous, c'est beaucoup plus simple que dans certains pays où ces conventions sont gérées par des ministères différents. Je pense que voilà ce que je voulais dire en termes de cadre que nous avons mis pour les questions de gestion des risques climatiques. Et ce qu'il faut dire aussi, c'est que ces questions sont portées à un haut niveau. Que ce soit le CNEDD ou le dispositif national de prévention et de gestion des crises de catastrophes, en fait, ils sont ancrés au cabinet du Premier ministre. Donc, c'est pour dire que ce n'est pas des thématiques sectorielles, c'est des thématiques transversales et on leur a donné un fort poids pour qu'elles puissent bien être prises en compte sur le développement au niveau national. Voilà ce que j'ai voulu apporter comme ce que nous faisons en termes d'adaptation pour faire face aux risques climatiques et autres effets connexes des changements climatiques.
Merci d'abord SG pour cette intervention. Est-ce que vous avez des recommandations spéciales à faire au regard des leçons donc tirées de cette expérience?
Bon, les recommandations que je veux faire, c'est que le cadre tel que nous l'avons mis au niveau national pour gérer toutes ces questions, il a donné ses preuves et beaucoup de pays viennent s'inspirer de comment le Niger a fait son montage institutionnel pour gérer les questions des changements climatiques de manière globale. L'autre chose, c'est que nous avons mis en œuvre beaucoup de projets. J'avais parlé de PANA. Après le PANA, on a mis ce qu'on appelle le PANA résilience, donc pour faire des activités génératrices de revenus auprès des femmes, des jeunes, pour développer, restaurer l'environnement. Après le PANA résilience, nous avons mis en œuvre aussi ce qu'on appelle un projet adaptation à base communautaire. Et tout ça, c'est un certain nombre de communes au niveau local. D'ailleurs, ce que j'allais augmenter que pour mieux prendre en compte l'adaptation qui doit être locale, c'est qu'on a regardé ce qu'on appelle les plans de développement communaux. Parce qu'au Niger, il y a une décentralisation. Au-delà de l'État, il y a les régions, ensuite il y a les collectivités, les communes locales. Et ces communes-là, elles ont leurs plans de développement communaux. Et donc ces plans, on essaie de les regarder pour intégrer la dimension des risques climatiques pour qu'au niveau local, en fait, les gens puissent mieux prendre en compte cette question-là. Je pense aussi que c'est des bonnes pratiques comme ça qu'il faut essayer de voir comment, dans d'autres pays, on peut les répliquer. Les projets que nous avons mis ont généré beaucoup de bonnes pratiques, beaucoup d'expériences. Ça aussi, nous avons un site sur lequel c'est partagé. Là, on peut vous donner l'adresse. Les gens peuvent aussi aller regarder ça pour voir comment ils peuvent les répliquer dans leur pays ou à leur niveau. On a aussi mis en place une plateforme de connaissances générées. Donc tout ça, vraiment, il y a des outils de partage. Et donc, allons-y. Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de pays ici. On peut aussi créer un réseau entre les différents pays, entre les différents pratiquants de méthodes de lutte contre les risques climatiques et puis essayer de partager ça pour que les uns et les autres se les approprient. Voilà.
Merci, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général. I'm going to summarize. I hope I can, really. What the General Secretary, the Executive Secretary has said. So he has started by mapping a bit the national situation, saying that after the Rio conference in 1992, it was recommended that each country should have its document called Agenda 21. And Niger has also drafted its its Agenda 21. This has been led by a national council on the environment. So this has permitted to adopt the first adaptation plan, which is called the National Plan for Environment, of the Environment for Sustainable Development, which has 6 programs. These include climate change and vulnerabilities, and the program on climate change and climate vulnerabilities has led to the elaboration of the communication, of the national communication. So actually, Niger has already drafted 6 national communication on climate change. Also, some studies on vulnerability have been conducted by Niger. And 4 main sectors have been identified, including agriculture, water, forestation, and health. This has led to the adoption of another document, which we call the National Action Plan for Adaptation on Climate Change. And this document was approved in 2006 and is taken into consideration the immediate needs of the country in terms of climate change. Several projects have been implemented through the National Action Plan on Adaptation for Climate Change, and these projects have taken into consideration the women, youths, agriculture, health sector, etc. Several institutional mechanisms have been also adopted under the leadership of the CNEDD. But it's important to also mention that the CNDD is set in place to manage the 3 conventions approved during the Rio conference in Rio de Janeiro, including the climate change, desertification, and biodiversity. And we know that the risk management is under the Sendai framework. However, as the CNDD represents an institution, a national institution that gets all these different departments, including climate change, biodiversity, and desertification, it's much easier for the country to manage all these conventions because they are all gathered, they are all convened in the same institution, and that institution, which is the CNEDD, is managing the implementation of all these conventions. So the coherence is much easier to be done rather than in countries where we have different departments covering the different sectors of the development. In terms of lesson learned and recommendation, it's important to remind that a lot of countries are coming to learn from Niger and to understand a bit how the system, this mechanism is managed in Niger. It has also helped to launch community-based adaptation approach that has permitted to include communities, to consult the communities, and to make sure that their needs and their needs are taken into consideration in every project. Also, the national communitarian plan, which are led by the decentralization, so by the mayors, is reviewed and has taken into consideration climate change and vulnerabilities. So these are some experience that they can share with whoever is interested and see how it can be replicated in other countries. They've also a platform of knowledge sharing where they will be happy to again, they can share the link with whoever is interested. And finally, they think that it's possible to create a kind of platform where different countries can come with their experience and share it with the other member of the platform. That's briefly what has been said. I hope I'm close to the reality. Thank you so much. With this, let me jump to the next speaker. The next one is Ms. Hamsatou Issa, who is a gender focal point in Niger. Ms. Hamsatou will welcome the side event and probably give some speech on the importance of including gender in all the policy. Alors je disais, le prochain intervenant sera Madame Hamsatou Issa, qui va certainement accueillir l'événement, mais aussi faire du plaidoyer sur l'importance d'intégrer la gente féminine dans les programmes de développement. Merci.
Merci bien, Monsieur Denis. Et bonjour à tous. Il l'a déjà dit, je suis Madame Issa Hamsatou. Je suis la chargée de communication du CNEDD, le Conseil national de l'environnement pour le développement durable, également au point focal national genre et changement climatique. Effectivement, les personnes vulnérables, même si quelque part, lorsqu'on parle de genre, on voit plutôt la femme, puisqu'elle est la plus vulnérable, eh bien, la femme, la jeune fille, le jeune garçon, les personnes âgées ne sont pas en reste dans le cadre de l'action climatique. Quand je prends par exemple le cas des femmes, elles se sont vues renforcer leur capacité en matière d'adaptation, en matière d'organisation interne, c'est-à-dire en matière de comité de gestion, de crise, de ces effets néfastes des changements climatiques. Également autour de certaines plateformes où nous les sensibilisons à travers plusieurs outils communicationnels. Par exemple, au niveau de la plateforme que nous disposons au niveau du Niger, à savoir la plateforme nationale de dialogue politique sur les changements climatiques, l'agriculture, la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle. Et également, ces personnes vulnérables, spécifiquement les femmes, bénéficient également elles sont bénéficiaires de plusieurs projets. Les projets les accompagnent notamment dans le cadre des AGR, les activités génératrices de revenus, et également au niveau du Niger, même si la femme n'a pas directement, puisque c'est juste une portion de place qu'on leur attribue pour pouvoir faire, par exemple, l'agriculture, elles n'ont pas significativement accès à la terre. Néanmoins, le peu dont elles bénéficient lui permet de subvenir à ses besoins et de faire face aux aléas climatiques. Toujours concernant les efforts de renforcement de la résilience pour une approche globale, nous avons également cette réalité qui est là. Aujourd'hui, ces personnes vulnérables, elles sont conscientes de l'existence des changements climatiques. Quand je prends les derniers chiffres, par exemple, au Niger, nous avons pour cette année 178 personnes qui ont perdu leur vie, sans compter la perte des biens matériels, l'effondrement des maisons, également les femmes qui n'arrivent pas à subvenir à leurs besoins, conséquences de ces effets néfastes des changements climatiques, mais qui sont également accompagnés, puisque nous avons dans notre pays un ministère en charge de l'action humanitaire et de la lutte contre les crises alimentaires qui s'occupe de cet aspect, et elles sont accompagnées dans ce sens. Maintenant, s'il faut parler, le secrétaire exécutif en a déjà fait, jusqu'au niveau local, nous avons amené les maires à prendre en compte l'aspect changement climatique à travers les plans de développement communaux. Et ces plans de développement communaux ont été même évalués pour voir comment est-ce que cette prise en compte, cette intégration des changements climatiques peut être évaluée. Et vous avez également au niveau des ressources en eau, vous n'êtes pas sans savoir également que ces personnes vulnérables, surtout la femme, parfois elles parcourent des milliers de kilomètres pour pouvoir avoir de l'eau, pour venir faire les travaux ménagers, aller chercher du bois. Et également l'aspect santé, parce qu'on a l'impression que parfois, lorsqu'on parle de changement climatique, l'aspect santé est peut-être un peu mis de côté. Or, nous sommes là et nous faisons face également à ce qu'on appelle les maladies climato-sensibles. Également, au niveau de ce qu'on appelle, tout à l'heure, le secrétaire d'État en Afrique, des plateformes, je vais parler ici d'un cadre de concertation des acteurs intervenant dans le domaine des changements climatiques, l'adaptation et l'atténuation. C'est un cadre qui se tient avant ou après la tenue des conférences des parties sur les changements climatiques. Au Niger, nous avons amorcé le processus de l'élaboration du plan d'action genre et changement climatique. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir qu'il a été demandé et parti à la Convention canadienne sur les changements climatiques. Nous sommes là-dessus et toutes les couches sont prises en compte dans ce plan d'action. Bientôt, nous allons procéder à sa validation. Voilà, grosso modo, M. Denis, ce que je voudrais partager avec le public.
Merci madame. C'est plutôt à dessous. Denis viendra après pour la seconde. Ok. Peut-être avant de traduire, je vais laisser la parole au SG qui voudrait ajouter un élément complet. Ouais. Le secrétaire exécutif, pardon.
Oui, avant de raconter une chose en 2 mots, si nous faisons des séances d'éducation, de sensibilisation et de formation publique au local sur ces questions-là.
Merci. So before I try to summarize what Ms. Issa said, the Executive Secretary has simply reminded that beyond what everything he said already, they have also an education plan, education program that targets especially youths and children at the community level. Coming back to Ms. Issa, who is the responsible of communication of the CNEDD, she states that women, young girls, young boys are part of the mechanisms that they put in place, and they've drafted some communication tools to sensitize the women, essentially, and the girls. And these women are benefiting also from different projects that intend to increase and improve their source of income. We know that in Niger, access to land is barely issue of men. However, the situation is progressing, and the very limited access that women have to land help them to improve their source of income and build then their resilience. This year, they've noted 178 people who died during the flood that Niger has experimented. And also it's clear that despite the efforts of the government, women still are not capable to afford all their needs, especially at the local and community level. And therefore, as the Executive Secretary mentioned before, the local action plan that are reviewed, that are adapted according to the recommendation of the UNFCCC are trying to improve the health system. I mean, this local action plan are trying to improve the health system and also the condition of the women at the local level. Finally, she mentioned that there is a concertation framework between the different actors just to make sure that all the views are taken into consideration. And also there is a national action plan, gender action plan, and gender and climate change action plan that consists to really collect the main challenge of the women and try to address them in this framework. Thank you so much, Ms. Issa. Merci beaucoup, Madame Issa. Pour cette phase donc d'ouverture, je vais donc inviter le dernier intervenant, qui n'est autre que M. Issa Garba. So allow me to invite Mr. Garba Issa, who is the National Coordinator of Réseau des jeunes du Niger sur le changement climatique. So Nigerian Youth Network on Climate Change. Mr. Issa Garba, the floor is yours.
Okay. It's okay. Merci, Monsieur Adessou. Merci également au secrétaire exécutif du CNEDD pour avoir initié ce side event avec l'appui, je vais dire, de nos partenaires aussi, qui ne cessent de nous appuyer, à savoir SLYCAN, GNDR. Vraiment, au nom de nos organisations aussi, je vous dis merci pour toute l'assistance que vous nous portez. Et pour revenir en ce qui concerne les actions qui sont mises en œuvre ou bien qui sont entreprises par les organisations de la société civile au Niger en matière de gestion des risques de catastrophes, en matière de pertes et préjudices. Je pense que nous apportons, conformément à nos objectifs, un appui à l'État en ce qui concerne la réalisation de certaines activités. De prime abord, nous avons, par exemple, en ce qui concerne nous, le réseau de la jeunesse nigérienne sur le changement climatique. Avec le GNDR, nous avons un projet qu'on appelle VFL, vue du front en français, qui permet de faire une analyse au niveau communautaire pour pouvoir avoir un certain nombre de données en matière de risque de catastrophe. Et après avoir analysé ces données, nous appuyons les communautés à pouvoir s'adapter ou bien à pouvoir répondre aux différents risques de catastrophe auxquels ils sont confrontés avec des moyens de bord qu'ils en ont. C'est-à-dire c'est vraiment en quelque sorte une adaptation à base communautaire dans le cadre de la gestion des risques de catastrophes. En dehors de ça, par exemple, dans le cadre de l'élaboration du plan national d'adaptation, nous avons, avec l'appui de CARE International, fait un rapport sur le profil pays pour pouvoir appuyer non seulement l'État du Niger et à bien formuler ce plan national d'adaptation et prendre en compte la question des pertes et préjudices. En dehors de ces aspects qui sont des aspects techniques d'accompagnement à l'État du Niger, peut-être le profil pays d'adaptation, nous l'avons élaboré avec, tout à l'heure je l'ai dit, avec l'appui financier de CARE International, mais aussi l'appui technique de SLYCAN International. En ce qui concerne les projets qui sont mis en œuvre physiquement sur le terrain, nous avons ce qu'on appelle, parce que chaque année, le Niger, le pays, la République du Niger, perd à peu près 100 000 hectares de terres arables, donc des terres agricoles. Ça, c'est un rapport de la Banque mondiale qui le dit et c'est pris en compte aussi dans la contribution prévue, dans la contribution déterminée du Niger, la CDN, qui vient de la deuxième génération de la CDN. 100 000 hectares. Et ces 100 000 hectares-là, nous, ONG et organisations de la société civile, nous faisons des actions de développement qui rentrent dans le cadre de la récupération des terres dégradées, ce que nous appelons la GDT, gestion durable des terres dégradées, qui consiste à faire des demi-lunes, des banquettes ou bien des bandes par feu pour pouvoir arrêter, parce que vous savez, le Niger, à 2/3 du Niger est désertique. Donc nous sommes confrontés à ce problème de désertification dont nous faisons des actions de récupération des terres dégradées. Et nous développons aussi des systèmes de régénération naturelle assistée avec les communautés. Et nous faisons aussi du reboisement. En dehors du reboisement, nous développons aussi vraiment de nouvelles techniques d'agroforesterie pour que vraiment les communautés puissent faire face à ces effets de changement climatique et à pouvoir encore lutter contre la désertification. Nous avons intégré, toujours avec l'appui des CARE International, ce qu'on appelle les principes communs d'adaptation. Les principes communs d'adaptation, aujourd'hui, les communautés, nous sommes en train d'aller au niveau de la base pour que vraiment la question d'adaptation puisse être vraiment une question communautaire et non un discours seulement ou bien un mot que nous allons juste utiliser dans des différents forats. Nous avons aussi un autre projet qu'on appelle GESAC, Jeunesse sahélienne pour l'action climatique, et qui aujourd'hui, dans ce projet, nous avons un objectif de mobilisation ou bien de formation des 1000 activistes jeunes locaux. Et ces 1000 activistes jeunes seront là pour pouvoir influencer les politiques locales au niveau des différentes communes dont ils sont ici. Et nous avons aussi la mise en place des clubs verts dans les différents établissements pour pouvoir ressusciter ou bien susciter le leadership environnemental au niveau communautaire. En dehors de ces clubs verts, nous sommes aujourd'hui en train d'enseigner les questions de changement climatique, la gestion des risques de catastrophes. Au niveau scolaire, nous sommes à travers un module effectivement qui a été élaboré par le CNEDD à travers le projet AAP, African Adaptation Programme. Donc ce module-là, nous sommes en train de l'intégrer dans le curriculum scolaire où des enseignants et des conseillers pédagogiques sont en train d'être formés pour que vraiment la dimension gestion des risques de catastrophe, la dimension changement climatique puisse être prise en compte dans le curricula scolaire. Véritablement, pour ne pas être très long et abuser de temps, je pense que voilà un certain nombre d'actions que nous sommes en train de mener pour pouvoir accompagner l'État du Niger. Merci, M. Adesso.
Merci beaucoup.
Oui, donc je voulais encore ajouter une chose, parce qu'Issa vient de dire que nous avons élaboré des modules en fait, d'enseignement et de formation sur les questions du changement climatique. En fait, on les a traduits dans le 8 langues nationales. C'est traduit, donc maintenant il nous reste en fait comment les vulgariser auprès des populations locales. Mais sinon, c'est traduit, c'est des modules de formation. Comme j'ai dit, on fait la sensibilisation, l'éducation et la formation. On a fait ces modules et maintenant, comment les dispenser? Je pense qu'avec le partenariat qu'on aura, on va pouvoir avoir l'occasion de le... Ensuite, on vient donc avec le PNA, on vient de faire une conférence sur les curricula de formation au niveau de l'enseignement supérieur. On vient de finir, avant qu'on vienne ici le 25 novembre, c'était novembre, non, octobre, on a organisé une conférence avec toutes les universités du Niger, avec le ministère de l'enseignement supérieur, pour leur présenter le programme de formation que nous avons élaboré pour le niveau supérieur. Merci.
It's interesting to see how the intervention of the partners are reminding a lot to the executive secretary, which is really great. Thanks for the precision, executive secretary. So he said that the learning document Sani Issa was talking about has been translated in 8 local languages in Niger, and now they are trying to find the best way to disseminate it. So probably they will develop a partnership again with the civil society organization to disseminate this document. And also, they've organized in Niger a workshop with all the universities present in Niger to present also a document that they've drafted for the universities, and they will see how to integrate this curricula in their national education system. Coming back to what Issa presented, so he said that, first of all, he thanks all the panelists and the partners who have been supporting the civil society organization, including SLYCAN and GNDR, who have supported them in the implementation of several projects on resilience building and disaster risk management in Niger. They say that before drafting the national adaptation plan that the executive said about, the organization has conducted, with the support of CARE International, a study to profile a bit the situation of vulnerability in the whole country, and this report has been submitted to the CNEDD to improve the document and to put in place a risk-informed document. Every year, he said that Niger lost at least 100,000 hectares of land that can be transformed in terms of agriculture. And as civil society organization, they are working to restore these soils through a different method, including the method called half moon, by planting trees, by putting in place also a natural and assisted regeneration system, and also the common principle of adaptation that has been developed by some of the partners. They have another project called GESA, which is about building the capacity of some activists and keeping them aware of all the policies at national level, so that they can really push the local decision makers to implement the policies. They have also the green clubs, they call it Club Vert, in the schools, and through these clubs they try to inculcate to the students some eco-citizenship actions in the city. And finally, they said that they try to put in place education program in the schools, and this program take into consideration risk management and climate change with the support, of course, of CNEDD. Thank you so much again, Mr. Issa. I want to thank you all, Miss Amsatou, Dr. Kamayé, and Issa for your time and your dedication. Again, congratulations for the great job. Merci pour votre disponibilité et félicitations encore pour les différents accomplissements dont vous êtes les auteurs au niveau du pays. Avant de vous laisser partir, je verrai s'il y a quelques questions dans la salle, très rapidement. Do you have any question in the room? Please raise your hand. Otherwise, we can thank them and go to the second session, if you don't mind. Bon, je ne vois aucune main. Merci donc pour votre disponibilité et si le temps le permet, restez avec nous. D'autres choses vont suivre. Merci beaucoup. Now I will invite Denis as the chief moderator of the next session. Okay, so Denis becomes Vositha. That's good. We shift from Denis to Vositha, and I become a panelist. Why not?
Okay, so gender balance and then we kind of move ahead quick fast. We might have to cut down on some of the time that we have to make sure that we keep to time. So thank you everyone for staying. So we are going to do the other way around. Now it'll be in English. I'll try to sum up at the end, maybe what we are presenting. So I'm Wijenayake and I'll moderate this part of this session. Thank you very much for Dr. Kamayé and the Niger government and GNDR for engaging in our event. Without taking too much time, I'll invite Dennis, Mr. Dennis Mumba, who's the Director for Research and Knowledge Management at SLYCAN Trust, to present on the work that we've been doing with Niger and also globally on the topic of resilience, loss and damage, and also youth engagement.
Thank you very much. Can we have the presentation? Yeah.
Until Dennis sets it up, I forgot, Sajani, would you like to take one of the chairs? We'll find your chair. Yes.
Hello. Okay. Okay, I hope you can all see the presentation. Perfect. So my name is Dennis. I'm Director of Research and Knowledge Management at SLYCAN Trust, and I want to talk a bit about what we do in relation to loss and damage, and also our work in Niger with the government of Niger and our local representatives. And so maybe quick introduction to SLYCAN Trust to start off. So SLYCAN Trust is a non-profit think tank. We work on climate change and a range of issues related to that. And this includes sustainable development, biodiversity ecosystems, social justice, animal welfare, but also climate risk management, human mobility, loss and damage, and entrepreneurship. And I'll go into a bit more detail on that in a second. We work on the global, national, and local level, and our main office is in Sri Lanka. We also have an office in Niger, in Niamey, and we have an office in Bonn, Germany. And we do work in Africa and Asia across different countries, and we have the German office to connect what we do there to the UNFCCC process. To come into this space, be highlighted there, access that, and have their voices heard inside the process. As a think tank, most of our work is connected to research and policy analysis base. Since we have our roots as a civil society organization, we also do work on the ground with communities. We do capacity building and we directly engage with, for example, farming communities, coastal communities, local authorities to develop partnerships, to facilitate collaboration and cooperation, and to share the knowledge that we are gathering. And one of our key work aspects is to make this connection between the local, national and global level, to get evidence from the ground, bring it to the policy space at the national level, and then also bring it up to the UNFCCC space to be actionable and contribute to the negotiations, contribute to policy spaces and processes, and to be basically our motto is from evidence to action. So to have evidence not just for its own sake, but to make it into implementation, into concrete actions, and to inform policy and planning processes. And yeah, so I think that's for the moment everything about SLYCAN Trust, a quick introduction. You can find a lot more information on our homepage and our knowledge hub. But what I want to talk about today is mostly our work on loss and damage, and especially evidence-based action to address loss and damage. And this is a work program that has different focus areas, and I will quickly talk about these. So one of these focus areas is human mobility in the context of climate-induced loss and damage. Human mobility, what do we mean when we talk about human mobility? It's a complex topic. There are different aspects to it. So we have migration, climate-induced or climate-related or climate-influenced migration. That can be internal migration, it can be international migration across borders, or labor migration. But it can also be like what we often see is like cyclical agricultural migration, farming communities going to cities, coming back after, members of farming communities coming back after a few weeks or a few months, and then going again after the harvest season. So that is one aspect. Disaster displacement is another. It's a very strongly visible form of mobility where natural, like climate-related disasters force people to move. And then we also have planned relocation, which is the permanent relocation of persons or assets or infrastructure away from climate-exposed and climate-vulnerable places. And we have immobility, which can be voluntary or involuntary. Often we talk about trapped populations, but we also have many cases where people do not want to move. So that is also a form of immobility that we can consider in the context of climate change. So, especially in the context of loss and damage, this is something that has increasingly entered discussions in the UNFCCC space, but also on the national level, and where we feel there's a need to have more evidence. So what are actually the concrete forms of loss and damage that influence human mobility, and how can these be addressed and supported as well? So that is one area of this work program. The next area is non-economic or cultural loss and damage. Some people prefer to call it human loss and damage. So basically the forms that are not directly measurable in economic impacts, but that do affect people in many ways. So it can be loss of territory, it can be a loss of cultural heritage, an attachment, a loss of sense of place, but also things like loss of ecosystem services, or again, human mobility as a form of non-economic loss and damage. And this is something, again, we are trying to document and collect information on, and I'll talk about what this concretely means. Two more focus areas for this project. One is livelihoods and entrepreneurship for resilience building. This is basically what we have found working with communities and working with national and local level stakeholders is that there's a need to enhance access to entrepreneurship and livelihood diversification options to make people more resilient, and especially people who are exposed to loss and damage. So people who are on the move, for example, migrants, we have found there's a big need and also a big interest in having skills developed and being able to set up a business, being able to engage in entrepreneurship and get the support that is needed for that. So that means, of course, finance, but it also means technical knowledge. It means how to set up a business, how to do navigate the legal system, how to register the business, what about certification, accreditation, and all these aspects that come with entrepreneurship. How to market a product, how to scale up, how to connect to other entrepreneurs. So that is something we want to support, and in Sri Lanka we already have set up a climate and innovation hub, which serves as a way to support entrepreneurs, especially in rural areas, to get access to all these resources and skills, and to be able to mainstream climate considerations, climate-friendly entrepreneurship, but also resilient and risk-managed and risk-aware entrepreneurship, as well as sustainable and ethical. So this is under our Ethical X program, which is on the national level, and then we have the hub set up on the national and local level to offer concrete support. And then the fourth and last focus area is youth empowerment and youth-led action. We do want to, we have identified youth as a key group impacted by loss and damage. We want to give them opportunities, and we also want to document how they are specifically impacted by loss and damage. And entrepreneurship connects again to that very well. Mobility connects again to this. A lot of youth are the ones affected by mobility. A lot of youth are the ones who have ideas and ambition to engage in entrepreneurship, but who often lack the tools to do so. So that is why we think these four focus areas actually come together really well to talk about loss and damage and highlight the issues that are there. And doing all of this means that we want to focus on inclusive and participatory processes. It's very important that we don't just come in, but that we actually have the voices from the ground and have them be actors in this and have the ownership of the things that are happening, the entrepreneurship support and setting up businesses, but also the research and the evidence generation. And that's why we do work with the government, but also with other local partners on having different voices incorporated by these partnerships and collaborations. And I don't know how much more time I have, so I will move this along quickly. There's much more to talk about, but I'll keep it brief. So this connects Ethical X, I already mentioned, our entrepreneurship program and the climate innovation hubs. We also do a lot of work with local authorities to incorporate risk management and resilience into their planning processes and actions. And we also have the Global Youth Forum on Climate Change. I think Sajani is going to talk a bit about this, which connects to the youth work and which is something that really helps us to scale up the youth work and makes the connections between youth. So then, very briefly, in Niger, we can see already some of these aspects that we're working on. So we're working on policy. For example, for the National Adaptation Plan process, we have also given inputs through the technical expert group under the UNFCCC on NAPS. We work on research to generate evidence, and that's evidence from the ground level, but also from the policy level. And what we try to do with this evidence is to bring it into the UNFCCC and to scale up visibility on loss and damage, especially on mobility and cultural loss and damage. So we have country case studies that we have selected. Niger is one of these, where we have a case study for the country, and we are setting up a portal to collect this evidence. And Niger and other country case studies will be focused on features on this portal as case studies, but we'll also collect stories from different actors in the country, and we collect images and videos. So we have local photographers going around, and we will collect these images of loss and damage, cultural loss and damage, of mobility. We will focus and highlight these in an exhibition also during the meetings of the subsidiary bodies in June in Bonn, and then hopefully aid as well. And in between that, in the countries themselves, the case study countries. So we'll have this in Niger, Maldives is a country we're in talks with, the other countries we will focus on under this program, as many as possible, as many as we have funding for, to really show the different faces and different voices for loss and damage on the ground and scale up visibility. And then to support this, we have the entrepreneurship component. We are setting up a climate innovation hub that we have in Niger as well to support people, and it connects to the youth empowerment again. We are working with youth in these countries to get their voices, but also to give them support to better engage in the UNFCCC process, to come to Bonn or to the COPs and engage, and to be part of the evidence generation and the evidence highlighting. And with that, I will finish this presentation and hand over to Vositha again. If you want more information, we have our homepage available. We have a knowledge hub on adaptation and resilience that features most of the knowledge products that we have developed. and very happy to have any follow-up conversation after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. So we have, I didn't introduce who's in the corner. Others who has been already introduced, I'll pass to others now to speak. But before I do that, Sajani, who joined us on the panel, will be speaking about the Global Youth Forum, and she's from SLYCAN Trust Youth. And Sani, unfortunately, wouldn't be able to join because we tried to get him online, but he's not joining. But instead of, in his place, we've requested Solomon, who's joined us, to highlight a bit. So Solomon, I'll come back to you. If there's a seat, you could come to the table as well, whichever you prefer. But first, I'll pass the mic to Adisu to talk about the Global Network on Disaster Risk Management. Do you say? I'll let you talk, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Initially, I've been invited to talk about the loss and damage finance. What is that covering? So, again, thanks for the flexibility, our capacity to cope with any new situation that happens. For those who have been here since the last week, we've been hearing a lot about loss and damage finance, loss and damage finance facility. So today, we want to develop a bit what we mean by loss and damage finance. You may agree with me that before we understand what loss and damage finance should cover, it's also important to understand what is loss and damage itself. And I want to say that we mean by loss and damage climate-related loss and damage, of course, all the impacts that are due to climate events, but that cannot be absorbed neither by adaptation nor by mitigation. Loss and damage. But beyond that, it's important to go a bit to the field to understand how loss and damage can be effective on the ground. So we'll travel virtually to a region called Garba in the northern part of Niger, for example, where after 2 days of regular rain, the whole village, 60 villages have been washed, literally washed, so nothing exists anymore. Like the farms have been totally washed by the water, things have disappeared, houses have been broken, even the hospital that was built by the government has disappeared because of the pressure of the water. And this situation has obliged most of the, all the community's members to flee from their living space to some new space. Some people join families, others join camp that the government has very quickly prepared to support them. This is something concrete that we are talking of, and which is happening every day in different parts of the world. We all have been hearing a lot about the flooding in Pakistan this time, and we know how that situation has been so destructive for the whole country. 2 weeks before we come to Sharm el-Sheikh, we've got the same situation in Nigeria, where we've lost more than 1,000 people, and a lot of houses, a lot of infrastructure were destroyed by the flood. So these are some concrete examples of what we mean by loss and damage. And the loss is something that you cannot by any means take back. The damage cover the aspects where things are broken but probably can be restored somehow. And when we talk about loss and damage in terms of finance, as I'm going there now, the finance that we are talking of is compensation way to partially cover the impact of this climate-related event on the victims of the climate event. So, for example, women in the region of Garba, where I was referring to, are the main farmers of the region. And sadly, they've lost everything. So I don't know if there is any possibility to count or to evaluate the cost of each plant and try to cover it. But it's important to say that even if this can be covered, there is a non-economic aspect which is related to all the psychological aspects, all the, for example, for the kids who can no more go to school because the schools are destroyed. And I've heard in the region that some young people, simply because of lack of job, because of lack of space to develop their income, have simply decided to join the terrorist group, the army group. So you can imagine how a mother, for example, seeing his young boy joining a very dangerous group like that, and that young man will come back in less than a year and probably kill people of his communities. You know, that's also another dimension of the problem. I know that in the northern part of Niger now, there are a lot of children who are staying at home and who cannot simply go to school because there is no school, or because the schools is becoming very dangerous. The schools are becoming very dangerous. The schools are places where people don't feel safe anymore. Because for those who have been following the history in Niger, for example, we've heard that the terrorists have come and burnt a whole school with the kids. So you can imagine all these cities that are simply connected to some climate-related events that have changed the whole situation of the communities. And I can present different examples. In the northern part of Togo, I know a lot of farmers are losing their land, so they are saying that the lands are becoming drier and drier, and because of lack of access to water, they cannot continue to develop the activities that keep them in place. So because of climate-related events, a lot of people feel obliged to flee their house. And for those who know Africa a little bit, we know generally that the coastal countries are experiencing very, very difficult problems simply because of the sea level rise. The coastal zones becomes very dangerous for the communities and for the business. But most of the coastal countries really rely on the economies on the, you know, how do you call it, the sea business. So the blue economy itself, the harbor, that are very active. I'm thinking about Togo, Senegal, Nigeria, Benin, who really depend on the business that is happening in the harbor. Unfortunately, because of the sea level rise, all these infrastructure are threatened, and probably there is a need for the countries to invest more than they expect, more than their business plan initially said. So what we are calling the developed countries to really consider here when we talk about climate finance is about thinking of, I will call it a social way to really support the vulnerable countries who are not forcibly the major responsible for the greenhouse emissions, but who are really hit by the impact, the adverse impact of this emission, to support these people. And this support is not an assistance, because seeing it as an assistance is will consist psychologically to decrease the humanity aspect of the resources. Here we are saying it's the right of the people who are living in this kind of environment to have also dignity, to benefit from normal life as the others. And this is why we are calling the developed countries to, again, be aware of the situation and take the right decision that can contribute to ensure a better life, ensure secure life to the local communities victims of adverse impacts of climate change in different communities. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Adisa. That's very interesting, bringing also examples from the ground that we connect with what we're doing at negotiations. The next two speakers would come in to highlight the part on how loss and damage action would be inclusive and participatory. We did touch upon this in our first part of the discussion where you moderated as well. But with a special focus on youth, now I would like to request Mr. Sajani Ranasinghe from Global Youth Forum to speak on how youth partnerships could contribute to addressing loss and damage. And if possible, if you could have 4 minutes to present, because I think we've run over time. Sorry, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So basically just a quick overview of the Global Youth Forum. It was initiated in 2016 by SLYCAN Trust together with the Ministry of Environment of Sri Lanka. So this is a platform where we bring youth from around the world and to sort of share ideas, best practices, as well as a platform to for youth to learn new things and to learn things that they are not aware of. Because even though we are in a room full of people who are aware of climate change, the reality is there might be youth out there who might not have sort of the same knowledge that people engaged in climate action might have. So it's important to sort of educate them, build their capacities and contribute to their resilience. So the Global Youth Forum on Climate Change is that platform that we've created to build their capacities and to sort of contribute towards their resilience. So in this year, that is in 2022 and 2023, we are focusing on human mobility as well as loss and damage across several thematic areas. So we do have the thematic tracks, youth in climate resilient food systems, climate resilience and risk management, where we do touch upon human mobility and to give them an understanding of human mobility. We also have youth entrepreneurship and innovation, and we are also giving them the knowledge about the COP negotiations as well. So these are some of the areas that we will be covering. So this will allow them to get a better understanding of how they are impacted by climate change and sort of the losses and damage that they experience, and to link that and to get an idea as to why these things are happening to them. We have opened up for collaborations as well as volunteers. So any youth organizations working with youth can collaborate with us, and even now we do have a lot of organizations that have already shown interest to work and in different countries. So if anyone is interested, I think my other youth team member Ashan and you could reach out to us, and we would be happy to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajani. Also to highlight, there are countries that are partnering as well, including Niger in the Global Youth Forum, and also the work on ACE. I think Solomon would be able to highlight that. Solomon has kindly volunteered and not volunteered, kindly agreed to speak with us and volunteered multiple times to, in other panels, to share information as well pertaining to Ghana and work relating to inclusive processes. So in 3 minutes to 4 minutes, Solomon, if you could highlight the work of SYND, how this relates to loss and damage action, and also policy engagement and what we're discussing. I'll come back quickly to the panelists afterwards with a question so we could have a common answer from everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. My organization is the Strategic Youth Network for Development, which is a youth-oriented and youth-focused organization, which always calls for youth inclusion in the national policy frameworks of the country. So what we are doing, we partner with the SLYCAN Trust in various policy and technical works, which we do with them. And one of the major projects we've done is drafting a youth strategy in the national adaptation process. If you look at Ghana in 2019, received UNEP funds for readiness. And with the readiness for the NAP processes, there should be a national strategy which should include gender inclusion, people with disability, and youth inclusion. So the Strategic Youth Network for Development took the opportunity to draft the youth strategy for it to be implemented, and this was done in partnership with SLYCAN Trust. And with issues about loss and damage, which we are talking about now, what Strategic Youth Network did before coming to COP was to collect grassroots stories of how loss and damages are affecting people in rural communities and affected areas. And in the affected areas, we took up the situation to look at the northern part of Ghana and also the southern part of Ghana. And in the northern part of Ghana, we're looking at a border country between Ghana and Burkina Faso, which they have a huge dam known as the Bagri Dam. And during rainy seasons, the dam overflows. So if there's so much pressure on the dam, the Burkinabés open the dam, and it damages lots and lots of properties in Ghana. There is loss of life, there's a lot of properties, and even there's food security issues. So we captured the story, and also we came to Keta in the Volta region, where Keta is known as the lowest point of Ghana, as my colleague or friend was saying about sea level rises. A lot of houses between 2003 to 2021 has been lost to water. And there was a huge tidal waves last year in Ghana, which there was loss of property. So we, as Strategic Youth Network for Development, went over there to capture the story, to share the issues of people in that community. We shared it with the government, and government is also trying to make steps. So when we talk about loss and damages, yes, it indeed affects the poor or people who even have nothing at all. It affects livelihood, it affects life, there is loss of life, and also there is loss of community belonging. Since I have 3 minutes, I think I will not talk much about it, but the Strategic Youth Network for Development works in water and sanitation, mining, forestry, energy, biodiversity, and climate change as an overarching theme, which the SYND does. I know I'll come back again, so I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon, and apologies because of the interpreting issues. We had to restate a lot of statements that we were making earlier, so I apologize for the time management issue we're having, but I'll quickly go to questions that I would like to ask the first two panelists and then a closing question. If there are any questions from the audience, would be happy to take one or two quickly as well. But I'll start with the open question to the first two panelists. That would be building on what both parties have presented with a cross understanding of what you were saying. What do you think needs to happen on loss and damage action to be effectively implemented? And how can the partnerships and networks that we build contribute to this? I know others who works with GNDR, and Dennis highlighted these activities that are happening across different countries. So building on what we're doing now, what is needed to be effectively implementing these actions at the ground level, reaching the vulnerable communities and making things happen faster? And I'll come back to Solomon and Sajani afterwards. So could I ask others to start and then Dennis to come after? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a very complex question, actually. What needs to be done, but I think it's first of all important to organize the topic at the international level so that we have a kind of framework that we follow. But because we can't wait for this framework to be in place, it's important to keep in mind the need and the importance of building resilience of communities. And building resilience of communities should go beyond our ego, so our organization ego, and try a complementary way we can work, because one of the main problems that I've seen on the ground is there are a lot of organizations doing similar things but not talking to each other and repeating from time to time, while the resources can be joined to go further or to have more impact on community. So it's important among the organization acting on the ground to talk to each other, to develop partnership, but at the same time to make sure that we do not continue to do the theory. It's important to leave the theory to the research, probably, and to come to the practice. I'm not saying that the research is doing only the theory, but the research put in place the mechanism that we should follow to implement on the ground. But it's important to make sure that we really take into consideration the need of the communities. And again, the last point, we are not resilience builders. We facilitate the building of resilience by the communities themselves because they know better their needs, and it's important to leave the space to the communities to contribute to their resilience building, but probably bring them the needed resources to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, in 1 minute as well.
Yeah, it's a really broad question. I mean, what should be done on loss and damage? A lot. It depends on which level we're looking at, of course. So I won't talk about what needs to happen here on this level. I just think, so maybe two things. One, again, coming back to the question of evidence and evidence-driven action. So I think what we need is to really understand how communities and different actors are impacted by loss and damage, and then turn that into something actionable. So find out how are they impacted, but what do they need, what will they need in the near, mid and long-term future, and what are the mechanisms in place to deliver support to them, and how can these be enhanced, how can they be built upon. So not to try to reinvent the wheel also, but to try to identify existing structures that can be built upon, that can be used to deliver support, and then make the connection again to this, to have the vertical integration, to make sure that what happens here at COP27 and going forward at COPs and in the UNFCCC connects to what's needed on the ground level and what's needed on the national level. And I think evidence plays a big role, but also, of course, as Adesso said, coordination and communication between different stakeholders on the ground, but also between different levels and between different sectors. We see this a lot, that there's a lot of like working in silos and information is not exchanged, and often there are duplicate projects in the same area. So I think to have partnerships between different actors, to set up structures of coordination is very important to avoid this and to make sure that the resources available are used in the most effective and efficient manner. And that again needs to come back to evidence to inform this resource allocation and to identify what is needed. And it's often like we know there's a lot of support needed, a lot of finance needed, but also how this concretely can connect to communities is something we need to identify and then be able to give them the support for them to build their resilience. So I completely agree with what Adesso said. And I would like highlight evidence and vertical integration and this partnership between stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Quickly coming to Sajani and Solomon, and then I'll maybe pass to Adesso to close. You focused on, both of you highlighted the communities, Adesso and Dennis. And since Sajani and Solomon work a lot with the youth, I just wanted to highlight some of the policy processes that could potentially maybe link to integrating youth engagement in loss and damage action. So one example, Sri Lanka has a national mechanism for WIM that's being set up. Similarly, there are platforms on action for climate empowerment that could be open access for public participation, information sharing, and then scaling up action. So what are your thoughts on how youth could be contributing to loss and damage action, and how these processes that you work in or work on in countries contribute to scaling up resilience and linking up with what that was just stated. So if you could also quickly say in one minute, I was going to say one word, but 1 minute, that would be great. Thank you.
So basically, I think it's important, as you mentioned, that youth get involved in policy processes. So with the work that we do, youth are a key stakeholder group, and we also ensure that we provide youth that pathway or the opportunity to be a part of the policy processes. For example, recently when Sri Lanka Ministry of Environment called for submission on the draft national environment policy, we did have consultations with youth. We took their input and we made sure that the youth voice was heard in the policy processes. In terms of loss and damage also, we can do the same thing. And I also feel that youth can be a bridge between traditional knowledge as well as the new technology as well. And they can play a huge role. It's just they are good human resources and they need to be given that opportunity, given maybe the capacity, and their full potential needs to be utilized by countries. And I think in that way, youth can contribute to sort of the national, local level commitments or activities or any work that's been done in terms of loss and damage.
Thank you, Sajani. Others, may I come after Solomon too? Okay, thanks.
All right, so I have a minute, so I have to cramp everything in. With youth, one thing we know about youth is we are passionate, there's energy with the youth, and there is innovation with youth. And with these three things, one thing we can do is to create learning materials to break loss and damage into learnable terms. Sometimes the terms are so confusing sometimes. So as a youth, young people can come together, which Strategic Youth Network for Development does a lot, develop these learning materials to be readable and accessible to everybody. And another thing we do is we create education and awareness in various communities where we share these learning materials, and those who can't read and write, we share with them through the local dialect. Another thing we do is creating a social media presence using Twitter, using Facebook, using Instagram, all the social media handles that are there. The reason being that a lot of young people are in these spaces. And the more we share messages across over to them, that's where young people can also take it up and spread the word throughout their communities. So as young people can contribute a lot by developing the learning materials in their simple understanding, and also making great use of the digital media to spread the word of loss and damage. If there is understanding, that's where people can relate it to their individual lives, and the change that we will look for can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. And Adesua, maybe I'll let you wrap up with your comment because I think the next side event is starting as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to add very quickly two ideas. The first one for me to build the resilience of the communities is to adopt the risk-informed development approach. I think it's important that our development plans, our strategies are informed by the reality on the ground. That's the first point. And the second point, I'm saying this because I've heard the UN Secretary General has recommended that we make data accessible, and I think it's a really good recommendation. However, it's important to make sure that these data are accessible, understandable by the local communities. Otherwise, we can have a lot of data, but as far as people cannot understand the data and make the right decision, probably the vulnerabilities will not decrease. So it's important to have data, but also make sure that the data are understandable, accessible, and usable by the local communities to make sure that they can be really valued. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, discussants. And thank you, Adesua, for moderating the session. It's been a pleasure having all of you here and also partnering in organizing this event. And I think we have 2 days, 1.5 days to go, and let's hope we can make what we discussed here a reality when we go out of COP27 in our different hats that we play during the negotiations. So thank you very much. Thank you.